Hello, and thank you for joining us for the Artful Family Visual Literacy for Caregivers webinar. I'm Janie Bass, Early Learning Specialist at the Reynolda House, and we're thrilled that you can join us today as we talk about visual literacy. Integrating visual literacy into early learning and pre-literacy development is something we are passionate about at the Reynolda House. But what does this look like? And what are some strategies and ways you can implement visual literacy into developmentally appropriate practices? Well, today we're going to focus on how art and close looking sparks an additional mode of sharing and learning. We're going to learn that museums are great community spaces. We often think of museums as a place for a field trip or for adults, but museums are for all ages. Museums specialize in engaging learning experiences. Tonight, I'm going to explore ways to introduce children to visual literacy elements using artworks. It is well known that early childhood literacy is becoming a well-discussed topic. There's no doubt that research is backing this up, but one area that continues to show importance is the ability to interpret visual information. Research continues to emerge from the National Association for Education for Young Children and the National Art Education Association on the importance of visual literacy. However, both researches show that there are very little programs that focus on this. At Reynolda, this is our focal point. We believe that literacy is not only the ability to read printed words, but also the ability to decipher the meaning or one's interpretation of a picture to express one's thoughts verbally or in printed form. So I want us to start off practicing a skill very vital to visual literacy and to developing the skill of close looking. I'm going to guide you through the process so you can experience it firsthand and begin close looking yourself. We're going to start with this picture called The Storm by George Ennis. And I'm going to use Julia, the director of education for Reynolda House, as our example today as I guide her through these close looking strategies. But look closely at this piece yourself and do some careful looking. We're going to practice what close looking is and what it looks like. The first question I'm going to ask is, what do you see?
I see some birds flying near a tree in the middle of the painting.
Very good. Do you see anything else?
Yeah, I also see some logs in the front of the painting that are lying on the ground, and some storm clouds in the sky. And I see a building in the left side of the painting.
Do you see anything else?
I see a person that might be maybe walking towards that building, or I can't tell if he's walking towards the building or not.
Now, let's base your observation of what you saw with your eyes to some things you think about this piece. What are some things you think?
I think that there's a storm happening, or maybe just ending. And I think that maybe this is farmland. I think it's a rural area at least.
Mm-hmm. And what about the log that you saw? What do you think about that?
Well, I think maybe that some logs came down in wind, and And maybe the one in the front, it looks like it might have been cut. I'm not doing this as a 3-year-old, but it's the same process.
And what are some things you wonder about this piece?
I wonder about that person. Is the person coming or going? Who is the person? Did it just storm, or is it going to storm? When is this? I wonder about that.
And we can see how many thoughts Julia just cultivated by see, think, and wondering about this piece of art. And I hope you enjoyed going through the same process at home. So thank you for going on this careful looking journey. Now I want you to imagine that we're in Reynolda and we're walking through the museum and we stop and I just start telling you all the things about this painting. Or I want you to think if we're in the museum and we stop and we look at it and we truly take time to look at this piece of art, to see, to think, to wonder about it. Which scenario do you think would be more engaging? Well, if we take time with children to stop, to see, think, and wonder, we're engaging them in active learning. We're validating their thoughts. It's inquiry-based learning versus rote knowledge learning. It gives them an information that they share with us, so we get to see their perspective and what they're gaining from this. We help them begin to cultivate questions, which engage in their higher order thinking skills. And we help them learn how to verbalize their thoughts and express themselves. So the importance of this activity is to show when we slow down and we let our children go and observe first, they become more interested in the piece because they begin to take ownership of their learning and they're doing careful looking and observing what their eyes are drawn to. We begin to unpack visual literacy as I walk you through these explanations of why it's so important to pause and take time to see, think, and wonder. And this reminds me back to my undergrad days when I came out thinking I needed to teach, constantly talking. And then in grad school, I learned to sit back, to observe children and follow their leads. Their predictions, it helps them make predictions, it helps them parallel information, and it helps with their pragmatic language skills. And we want to be intentional when we stop and look carefully, because it helps them create their own meanings. It engages them. It helps with their curiosity and creativity. And it also lets you know what they are interested in so you can follow the focus and interest of the child. It builds so many critical thinking skills, such as helping them make predictions and parallel information. But it also helps them find supportive evidence for what they're saying. And you can follow up with this by asking them questions like, what makes you say that? Explain this. And sometimes a child may wow us with their explanations of what they look at in art. I know that has happened to me. So engaging children in a thinking routine helps significantly, because just think, when we get out of our routine as adults, it's hard to organize our thoughts. And we often have to have routines to go about our lives. And I'm sorry, I'm trying to move the slide. But the value of teaching children routines helps them organize their thoughts and make meaning from images and visual. Just think about today's society, how many images we are bombarded with daily. We are bombarded with so many images that we need almost a routine to help us process this information. So when we see, think, and wonder, I want us to think about the see kind of as our first look, kind of like a pre-read, a picture walk. Then when we think, we're moving to the next step to begin to organize our thoughts. And when we wonder, we just free ourselves to think and ponder of all the possibilities we're seeing through images. And when we follow these steps, we help children create thinking routines. This routine comes from the Harvard Project Zero, and we often refer to it on our materials that we put out in the Reynolda education cards. And why do we do this? Because we want children to develop these skills because it carries over into different domains of learning. This skill is very similar to close reading. An author rarely states his purpose in black and white lines of text. We have to read between the lines to truly tell what the author is trying to communicate to us. The same is with art. And this is a skill that must be taught, just like math. We can't learn to count through osmosis. We have to be taught the process. The same is with art. We have to be taught a thinking routine. And we have to allow children the time to respond. And we have to encourage them to look from multiple angles and perspectives. And you can also give them clues because this is a learning process, something we really have to scaffold and help children with. Just like we didn't write our ABCs the first time we tried, a child's not going to be able to perfectly articulate what they see, think, and wonder. We must scaffold them through this process. It's small increments, not leaps. This process is referred to as visible thinking. It's a flexible but systematic approach or framework to integrate a child's development into thinking about what they're seeing, the content, and then connecting it to the different content areas. Children learn through play and exploration and repetition. This visible thinking routine aids children in this process of learning. We must learn to think over the process over the product. So many times we get focused on the product of learning that we forget to value the process of learning. The review and repetitions of skills like this are so valuable. When we see and when we think and when we wonder, we are creating a thinking routine. One of my favorite quotes from an educational philosopher is, "The formation of habits is education, and education is the formation of habits." When we truly think about this, we see the beauty of a thinking routine. But I have to say, it's not every day that myself, as a mother, as a professional, visit an art museum and have time for this. So finding ways to build this into everyday life is vital. So I want to encourage you to find ways to build this thinking routine into everyday life. One thing I do with my son when we're on the way to pick up my daughter from school is if there's a construction site or excavator or something, we talk through this. What do you see? What do you think it's doing? What do you wonder? So we can also build it into everyday life. The reason we work on these skills with the fidelity that we do is because we want to be intentional when we look at the scope and sequence. The goal is the art of seeing. The art of seeing is a process for looking carefully and exploring a work of art on a deeper level. This is a system developed by the Toledo Museum of Art, the art of seeing. It's a series of 6 steps: look, observe, see, describe, analyze, and interpret. When you learn to do this, you can look at any piece of art in any museum and be able to tie in the meaning of the artist. Elements of art, such as color, line, shape, space, and texture, are the principles of the design: the balance, the emphasis, the movement, proportion, rhythm, unity, or variety. But we have to start with the basics to prevent holes and gaps in a children's learning. So this is why we start with the basic see, think, wonder, and scaffolding those questions by giving clues, building on their interest and focus, so that we can spiral the scope and sequence into the art of seeing. Just like you wouldn't start with sight words, you would start with the ABCs and letter sounds. We start with the see, think, wonder. You can also tell by the materials that we create that we apply these evidence-based measures in mind, and we're thinking through this with that. So I want to walk you through the storm card that we created at Reynolda to show you a little bit of how we've tied in some of these elements to this discovery card. So a picture is a poem without words. So I love that. So we plan this card so you can enjoy this with your child. So we provide additional questions to help foster deep thoughts and model that thinking routine. So we want to help you model and scaffold your child along their developmental domain. So we simply ask that you ask the child to name all the things that they see. Then ask the child why they think the painting was named The Storm. And then ask them what they wonder about this image. And oftentimes that is my favorite part, to see them connect the first two questions and then come up with a wondering. And I walked you through this process with Julia earlier today, so you could kind of see what that looked like to give you an idea. We also add in some tiered vocabulary, and we define it in a developmentally appropriate manner. And we also add in a literature piece to provide that connection across the domains. So we try to integrate it as much as we can to make sure we're hitting all domains of learning. So a thinking, routine, and process. So we use images to inspire a whole new series of conversations, information sharing, and format of learning. So visual literacy is the ability to discriminate and interpret visual actions, objects, symbols, and other images while gaining meaning from them. Think how vital that skill is in today's world. How often as adults are we constantly deciphering things that we see? The International Visual Literacy Association defines it as a group of visual competencies a human being can develop by seeing and at the same time having and integrating other sensory experiences. So it cannot stand alone. It must be integrated in to be meaningful, and children learn what are interesting, relevant, and meaningful. I look at this picture of my daughter at the National Art Gallery with Winslow Homer's right, left, and she's acting it out. She had studied this picture at school, and when she saw the real thing, this was her reaction to it. And to me, it's one of my favorite photos of her because it's so candid. She finally got to see the real thing, and she's interacting it. But the whole point of this is that it's a reciprocal process. Visual literacy cannot stand alone and be meaningful. It must be integrated into the other domains of learning. And this little visual will help you kind of see that. So we have learning in the center. So it's very interconnected, and each piece is interconnected. There's core elements that make active learning authentic, and it's reciprocal. So we have learning, and then we have careful looking. That gives us the child's perspective, their ideas. It helps foster skills. That helps to teach the child to read between the lines. And then from that comes the inquiry and the conversation that builds upon the child's interest and lets you know their ideas and thoughts. And then the activities that play with a purpose, the sensory, the hands-on learning. It's all an interconnected piece. And again, it's a process over a product. We value the process of learning because learning is not a cookie cutter process. It's more like a scratch kitchen. You're in there mixing up all these different pieces to get the outcome of learning. And so again, these activities are inquiry-based and hope to lead to conversation between you and your child to help integrate information. That's with the art, the vocab, the literature, the hands-on learning, and the science activities. Here we've already selected a poem you guys can read. Who has seen the wind about the storm? Because you can see the wind a little bit in this painting. Assimilate, to take in information and help children form new schema. What do they already know about a storm, and how can we help develop that further? So we're building in that schema, and then scaffolding them, a tool for growth. Learners complete small, manageable tasks to reach new learning outcomes. So we want it to be manageable. We try to make it so you can individualize it to your child, because each child is a unique learner. And it needs to be hands-on. Direct involvement in a child needs direct involvement in their learning to empower them in active learning so that it is authentic. We try to take a new concept that they have some context in, but maybe not, and develop it further to keep it interesting, relevant, and meaningful. For example, the storm. They've probably all been in a storm, but do they really realize what causes a storm, or what does it look like from a different context? So we have very simple Pyrex dish, some frozen blue ice cubes mixed in with some red food dye, and you see the storm start to happen. And when that happens, that's your hands-on conversation building. And this helps keep it relevant so that you see the storm is starting to mix. And then you see my son creating a watercolor storm. And I was so proud that he actually chose some stormy colors from the painting. So he was, had that recall from the painting. So we're trying to keep it relevant, have recall, helping them make a connection, infer meaning, and then provide that repetition that's going to help with their zone of proximal development, because we want to meet them where they are. And each child is in a different spot, and that is completely fine. So when we think about visual literacy, I think about it as a bridge. And I kind of want to explain that a little bit. The importance of being visual literacy is so important, but learning to look is a bridge to deeper meaning when used in conjunction with other domains of learning. So in our increasingly visual society, the ability to create and interpret imagery is as imperative as the ability to read and write, listen, and speak. So we must equip our children with these skills. Processing information visually is a critical part of learning and development in early childhood. Children are born with natural curiosity and creativity. So when we provide them with this unrushed childhood, we tap into this and we build upon it. So don't be scared to individualize it. And when we set the background and we define it with examples, we're teaching them how to look closely. But you must be wondering, how does visual literacy integrate into the comprehensive approach for literacy? Well, I want to show you through a visual the many strands that are woven into the comprehensive literacy approach. And I want you to notice on here that it's not only the ability to read printed words. We also have background knowledge, vocabulary, language structure, verbal reasoning, and literacy knowledge. Reading is a highly complex process, and visual literacy, all those skills that I was just talking about, tie in to that thread of literacy so closely. When we're engaging our children in these types of activities, we're building their background knowledge, we're growing their vocabulary, we're providing language structures for them, we're giving them verbal reasoning skills. There's so many higher order thinking skills being developed through See, Think, and Wonder. And we're giving them literacy knowledge. They're realizing that images and text carry a message. But visual literacy also aids in metalinguistic skills, the ability to think and discuss, because this requires awareness. It also helps in oral retell. If you can orally retell something, then your written expression skills are going to excel, and with so much fine detail, and qualitative skills are so vital in the world of education. It's going to help with reading fluency skills, written expression, background knowledge, your ability to assimilate new information, and foreign language proficiency. So, at the beginning, I defined visual literacy as not only the ability to read printed words, but also the ability to decipher the meaning of one's interpretation of a picture and express one's thoughts verbally or in printed form. So you can see the thread of background knowledge, verbal reasoning, and vocabulary to the comprehensive literacy approach. So in closing, I want to review the See, Think, Wonder routine. And again, I want to show you that it can be inside a museum or it can be outside in the gardens. This was, I think, times where my daughter and I would just kind of pause and stop, and I would ask her so many questions. It can be in your backyard, driving down the road in the car. So I just want to encourage you to start building this thinking routine into some form of a daily habit with your child, and follow the lead of the child. That's so important that we follow their interest, what they like, and we develop that. And then that we help them make connections, because that helps with their assimilation of new information and building their schema. And then scaffolding them is so vital, because we're helping them in ways that not only help with visual literacy, but the comprehensive literacy approach. But I want to encourage you as a mother and an educator that growth occurs in small increments, not huge leaps. Sometimes we think, oh, we've done this for a week. Why isn't this working? This is going to take so much review and repetition. I want you to consider this the same as trying to teach the alphabet or rote count to 20. It's going to take that much work and skill to build this in and get a child to begin to articulate these things back. Review and repetition are vital for developing new skills, and we want to see small increments of growth. Rarely do we see those huge leaps. It's the daily little increments that we see. So now I'm going to have Miss Julia test out the thinking routine on me as we close. And this will give you another example to see this modeled. I will put up another piece of art, and she is going to walk me through the close looking process. Okay.
Thank you, Janie. So when we look at this work of art, what do you see?
I see like a lake, and it looks like a dad went fishing. And I see like a mom and some kids out front. It looks like one little kid has a frying pan. Oh, and I see a cow. And I see like lots of trees and mountains. But then I see some wood that looks chopped up front.
Anything else that you see?
I see a clothesline, and I think I see grandma out the window.
Well, Janie, what do you think about some of these things that you've noticed? What do you think about this painting?
I think maybe the dad went fishing for their supper. And I think maybe they were washing clothes today. And I think the mom and kids are happy to see the dad back.
Is there anything that you wonder about this work of art? and what's going on in this picture?
Mm, I wonder why the wood looks that way in the front, but then the back looks so different. Um, and I wonder why that's the only house I see.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder if anybody else lives close by.
That's a lot to wonder and think about. Do we have any clues to help us consider these wonders? They're also good questions to hold open.
Mm-hmm. That I would say I would begin to point out the difference that we see up front in this painting versus the untouched landscape in the back.
Mm-hmm. I think
That
that would
that would
be a
be
way to.
something. Yeah, I would be guiding the children in if the responses have been similar
Mm-hmm.
to what I had been to what I had given. Um, and I think there's a lot of different directions that the wondering and pondering could go with each child. And I think that's kind of the beauty of this process, um, is that each child's going to have a unique perspective or thought that they share. Um, but I do kind of, I think I would like wonder why the cow was out there by himself
Mm-hmm.
in the water. That seems to be a common one that comes up
Mm-hmm.
with children. But um, but I think it shows how easy and natural the thinking routine can become when we kind of get in the habit of thinking through the systematic approach to helping children think through this. Um, because there's so many different ways to process this information or think through it, but all of it leads to learning throughout the domains or can be built upon and integrated in. So I encourage everyone to think through this thinking routine and begin to use some of the resources that Reynolda has online or come in person to some of our events, and then find a way to implement this into everyday life, because it really truly does help literacy development. So and thank you guys so much for joining us, and we hope that you will reach out to our website to join us for our other events. At Reynolda at Home, we have online resources, we have virtual read alouds, we also have in-person outdoor read alouds, outdoor learning activities, we have community day and Groga. So we hope that you will join us this spring for future events.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us, and thank you, Janie, so much for giving us information about the importance of visual literacy and how to begin to practice that learning at home or at school. Thank you.